Well, good morning, everybody. This is Chris Conroy, EVP of National Accounts with Insurance Agency Marketing Services, or IAMS. And I'm pleased to be hosting today's second webinar program of our 5-part series, Elevate Your Sales EQ, which we know you'll find to be a highly engaging conversation with nationally recognized expert on client financial psychology, Dr. Jack Marrion, who will be providing tangible takeaways that you can incorporate into your practice immediately. IAMS has a deep-rooted commitment through its 34 years in business to delivering on one simple promise to our customers: to help you win by providing tools and advice so that you can thrive. We're committed to winning your trust through industry excellence and leadership. This Elevate Your Sales EQ series will deliver on that promise, the promise that will help make you a better financial professional in your relationships with your clients. And that's why when we talk with some of our top advisors on how we could up their sales game, especially with the challenges faced with COVID-19, we focused our attention on how you can get better and connect with your clients on an emotional level by increasing your emotional quotient. Because we know it's one thing to have the highest IQ in the room, but that doesn't close sales. Having a higher sales EQ matters more. The ability to connect with your clients through empathy, understanding your own emotions, and communicating in ways that make sense to them. That's why upping your emotional quotient is so important. I also want you to know that one core differentiator about IAMS is that we're different than any other IMOs that you might be doing business with. We're here to build your business and reach your fullest potential through a collaborative, comprehensive, and customized approach to your business. Whether it's our individualized marketing analysis program, our proactive industry-leading case support, or many of the incentive programs that we offer, know that each is uniquely tailored to your needs. Independent advisors are our customers. You are our customers. Now, back to today's program. We held our first part of this webinar series last month and had a record number of participants, many of whom are registered for today's program as well. For today's second installment of our Elevating Your Sales EQ series, we will cover how client decision-making biases impact fixed indexed annuities. Before I introduce our featured presenter today, I'd like to take a minute to thank North American Company for Life and Health Insurance, whose generous sponsorship helped make this webinar series possible. We're pleased to have North American Sales VP Tia Stanley on the program with us today, whose broad experience and skills in the annuity industry at both a leading distribution firm and with top carriers has made her a well-recognized sales leader. Tia is a recent award winner of the NAFA Next Gen Annuity Leadership Award. Tia, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. I sure do appreciate it.
Yeah, and then North American, obviously a leader in the industry and continues to have outstanding products and solutions for your clients. I encourage you to take a look at their suite of products. Reach out to your marketer here. We can help you if you have any questions about it, but very fine products, very innovative, and obviously from one of the most recognized and financially strong companies in the industry. So thank you, North American, for your generous sponsorship.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Chris.
And now I want to introduce our annuity think tank expert, Dr. Jack Marrion, as our featured presenter today. Let me share a little background on Jack before I hand it over to him. Many of you know Jack, but if you don't, he's a top industry and academic author, having written things such as Index Annuities, A Suitable Approach, Gen X, Gen Y, and Fixed Annuities. One of my favorite, Real World Index Annuity Returns, with the Wharton School of Business professor David Babel. His research work with the Advantage Compendium, and he's been an expert witness for the NEIC, also with the 2016 Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule combined litigation effort, which ultimately led to that rule's defeat in the Fifth Circuit. Jack's also been a past president of a broker-dealer, past officer of a life insurance company, past officer of an investment banking firm, and he's led academic research in how annuity clients think and what their internal biases are, with a doctorate from Webster University on behavioral biases, where he's been a research fellow. Last, Jack has won the NAFA Bo Johnson Lifetime Achievement Spirit Award recognizing his many years of contribution to the fixed annuity industry. Jack, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris.
And today's format, before I hand it officially over to Jack, is relatively straightforward. Jack is going to lead us through his presentation. I'll pose a few questions and observations along the way. I'll also be offering to everyone on this program several polling questions to help make this an interactive program so that you can see how other advisors are also thinking. So be on the lookout for those polling questions throughout the program. Please answer them, and then I'll share the collective responses along the way. If you do have a specific question, you can ask that in the chat box, and we'll make sure we get back to you right after the program. Well, with that, Jack, let's get into today's program, how decision-making biases impact fixed indexed annuities. And I guess kicking things off, Jack, given everything that's going on in the marketplace, the market's up, market's down, a lot of political uncertainty, COVID-19, are the biases that we're going to cover today even more important to understand?
They are amplified. There's a lot more fog in the picture.
Well, absolutely. So let's get going with today's program. What do we have here, Jack?
Well, it's difficult to predict the future. So what I thought we'd try to do here is predict the past. And what we have here are two situations showing what the stock market did for 4 years over previous periods. And you have to guess how the market moved in the 5th year. In the 5th year of A, did the market go up or down? In B, in the 5th year, did the market go up or down? So let's try to predict the past. Make your prediction. And now let's see how you did. If you said the market went up in A, you were right, because that shows the early part of the last bull market, and the market did go up. If you said the market went down in B, you were right again, because that was the start of the 3-year bear market after the turn of the century. And things actually had quite a bit worse. Let's try this again. We have 2 more scenarios. How did the market do in the 5th year of these 2 historic periods? Make your pick. Okay. If you said the market was going down in C, you were right, because that was just before the crash of '08. And I'm teasing a bit in the next one, because we haven't completed the 5th year. We don't know what's going to happen, which is a bit of the point. What all these slides refer to is something known as projection bias. And what that means is taking what's happening yesterday and today and saying it's going to happen in the future. A variation of that is something called gambler's fallacy, where you think that what's leading in the past is going to change in the future. And both are wrong because they come from bad assumptions. We like to think that we make totally rational decisions, that we take in the data and then we maximize the marginal utility of the situation. But that rarely happens. And one of the big reasons is there's a fog that comes in between the data and our processing of the data. And that fog distorts the data and causes less than optimal decisions. And what this whole talk today is about is getting rid of the fog. It's simply enabling the client to more accurately see the data presented. And often, lucky for everyone in the room, when data is accurately presented, it often leads to an annuity choice decision. This slide shows the main biases. There are over 24 of them, and there's over 120 minor biases. But these are the ones that typically affect financial decisions. We talked about projection bias. Information overload means getting too much information in, so we either make bad decisions or no decision at all. Rules of thumb, also called heuristics, are ways we apply things we've learned in the past to the current situation, which may be good or bad. Time is about how the future or presentness of the consequences affect our decision, and framing is how the information is presented. So let's kind of hit each of these separately and talk about ways to overcome the bias. We'll start with projection bias or return to projection bias.
Yeah, and Jack, I just interject, projection bias today, I think it's a lot of people think is today's present going to predict the future? And, what we've seen is just in this calendar year, I think if you were asking me in early February if things were going to continue, maybe a lot of people had that bias, but yet in 20 short trading days, the S&P 500 went down 40%. Now, in the last 100 trading days, including today, I think we continue to set new records in the S&P 500. So it seems like that one is probably really relevant today. Is just the uncertainty out there. And I know we're going to have that conversation today about what does that cause people to do? Do they sit on their hands and say, well, I just don't know what to do? And and so I think, I'm excited to have this conversation about what can we help clients understand, and so that they can reach a decision, they can feel comfortable moving forward with make a decision on indexed annuity.
That's very good. And it also ties into your EQ and IQ thing. Back in February, they did a survey, and 18 out of 20 consumers believe there would not be a downturn in 2020. Now, this is in February of this year. 18 out of 20 consumers. Then they asked the advisors, the ones with the experience and the financial IQ, the same question. 19 out of 20 financial advisors said there would be no downturn in 2020. And as you said, look what happened less than a month later. The way you can deal with that is by changing the period. People have in their heads what happened in the last 10 years. What is helpful is showing them a longer time period, that the market does not always go up, go down a little bit, and then go right back up again. It's helpful to show them what happened in the previous decade, or the previous 3 decades, or the previous 100 years, because it enables them to approach investing in finances with a broader perspective. So if projection bias is interfering with a good decision, change the picture, change the projection.
Yeah, Jack, I'll just throw in a comment here. Your article, the white paper, I encourage everybody to read. You see a section about, we're playing a hot hand, or we're playing a bear market, and some of this is, I think is for consumers to step back and realize you can't predict the future. I was reading just a couple days ago, Northwestern Mutual had a planning and progress study which showed how Americans now more since the pandemic are more cautious than pre-pandemic period, with 42% saying they're less willing to take risk and they want to protect their assets. And so I'm going to pose a polling question here. Again, encourage you all to respond, kind of share our collective wisdom about how you are seeing your clients and their response to risk. So there's a question I'm going to pose here about how most of your clients are feeling, with taking, they want to take less risk, they want to take more risk, they feel like they're playing a hot hand, or they just don't know. And so we'll collect those responses here as we're talking. And again, I think that study I cited from Northwestern Mutual suggested that certainly a lot of clients out there want to take less risk, and maybe they feel because they're a hot hand, maybe they just feel on the political uncertainty. So we're collecting those responses right now, and I'll show those responses here in just a second. So you see there, I sharing the results that 76% are saying they want to take less risk, maybe a quarter want the same, and 0 want more risk. I guess I'm not surprised by that, Jack. You probably aren't either.
It fits in with everything else.
So let's move on then to the next slide.
Information overload is a problem with everyone, and it becomes even more of a problem as we get older. We have something called fluid intelligence, and what that is how much information we can take in and how fast we can process the information. And fluid intelligence starts to fade about age 20, and it starts declining right when we become an adult. The reason we're not all going by age 40 is crystallized intelligence is building up, and that's taking what we are learning and putting it in other parts of the brain so we can call on it and don't need all new data to make new decisions. And the combination of the two builds wisdom. And as we get older, wisdom increases because crystallized intelligence increases faster than fluid intelligence is leaving. At some point, the wisdom starts to decline. It can start at any age. Typically, it's at least starts by age 80 or age 90. It does not mean that an 80-year-old makes worse decisions. I'll try it again. Doesn't mean an 80-year-old makes bad decisions. It means the 80-year-old you would not make as excellent a decision as the 60-year-old you would have made, but probably is still a better decision than the 35-year-old you. The way you deal with information overload is to be aware of it and the fact that it affects older people more than younger people. Things you can do to minimize it: hold appointments in the morning when we're freshest. Hold them in your office. Make sure it's quiet. The sun's not shining on the table. There's no music in the background. Answer the key elements of every financial decision that consumers want to know, which is how much can I lose, how much can I make, and can I get my money? And probably the most important part is the next slide, which is tell the consumer what they need to know and not everything you know. That's a biggie. And don't immediately answer the question. Figure out why they're asking the question. Someone might say, I might ask, is the annuity safe? And if your first response is, why, yes, only 3 fixed annuity carriers went into receivership in the last 12 years, that could raise other issues. Because what the consumer really wanted to know was, is this like a stock where it goes down? So ask the consumer, you've raised an excellent point, what is your main concern? And get the better question asked. So that's information overload.
Yeah, Jack, I think that's exactly right. We, talking to a lot of advisors around the country, it's really, I think it's like the question behind the question. So what is that? They're asking, tell me more about the liquidity there, or can I get my money out? What's behind that? I think, the best advisors are the ones that listen more than they speak. And we kind of all know, advisors on this program know that. You've been in this business, many of you, for a long, long time, but the best ones are ones that are very good listeners.
Rules of thumb can work for you or against you. This is one time when it can actually work for you. We often show assets as a ledger sheet, black and white. And here's an example of $300,000 split between investment, savings, and annuities. However, if we show this in a picture, this is the kind of picture we get. And our rule of thumb says that picture looks lopsided, because what we tend to do in our head is divide things into equal slices. And the slices in this slide show that they're not equal. And the next slide shows really what we think we want to see. Now, this does not mean by showing them a picture like this that they're going to move $55,000 over to the annuity, but it means they might reevaluate their position on annuities and determine how much more they need. The point here is numbers are fine, pictures are much more effective.
Yeah, certainly. We know that a lot of people are visual learners, as am I. And so, have a picture there can tell a complex story and kind of relate in a way that many consumers can understand.
Yeah. When I talk about time, I'm typically talking about psychological distance, and that's a fancy term that simply means we view the consequences of something happening tomorrow with much more urgency than something happening down the road. Retirement is typically viewed as something down the road, and we don't think about it, something ethereal. And what is helpful is to bring it into the reality of the present. And you do that by asking, how are you going to pay the bills? Or even better, you ask the client to create a budget of what they're going to need to spend in retirement. Now, granted, if they're a long way from retirement, the numbers are going to be off, but the whole process brings crystallization to the idea of retirement, that it's going to happen. You can also take today and move it into the future, and that can be helpful. You have a client that has decided they really should put $100,000 into a fixed annuity, but they want to wait until the market goes up one more time. They want to catch that one more ride on the market. It can be helpful to say to the client, would you be happy or sad if 1 year from now that $100,000 was worth $75,000 and you had not moved it to the annuity? Because there's only one answer to that. And the other thing is to be specific, as I just was. Don't talk about risk in mutual funds and stock markets. Talk about cold hard cash. How do you feel if you lost $25,000? And sometimes it's helpful to take today and move it into the future because it can amplify the reward of making the right decision. A MYGA today might have a 2.5% rate on 5 years. 2.5% isn't a lot of money, but if for somebody that has $89,000 sitting in a CD earning 1%, 2.5% means they will be guaranteed to have $100,000 in 5 years. So look at the psychological distance, be aware of how time affects decisions, and present the data so it reflects that.
Yeah, Jack, I know another thing you and I were chatting about in preparing for this particular program was to think of, many people think in terms of milestones. Milestones, you know, for them might be the year that they quit working, the year that they turn to part-time work, the year that they activate their Social Security, they downsize or move out of their house, certain age bands, you know, their mind is 65 and 70 or, you know, certain milestone years. And I think it's important to connect with the client and listen again what those intended milestones are, because that's going to create a planning opportunity for the advisor.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And that leads into framing, which is the biggie. How we present the information is probably the most important aspect of how a decision is made. And for example, the safety question is sometimes not stated until the client brings it up, which means it can have a negative context. It's often helpful to start off with a new client by asking them, do you know anyone that has ever lost money in a fixed annuity? And the client, most of them will say, no, I don't, which reinforces in their minds that fixed annuities are safe. Occasionally you get someone that says, yeah, my brother-in-law bought one of those and he lost $15,000 in the last bear market. And then you explain the difference between variable annuities, which is what the brother owned, and fixed annuities, which is what you're talking about. So that's an example of framing.
Yeah, Jack, I'm going to launch a polling question here. I know a lot of you received Jack's white paper on decision-making biases, but I'm going to launch that in case you did not receive it. It's a great summary of what we're covering today. Excellent white paper. Many advisors are taking that and implementing many of those ideas into their practice. So if you would like that, you had not received it, I'm going to launch that polling question. We'll make sure we capture that and have your annuity marketer here get back to you. So if you hadn't received it, you'll have that. The other part, and just a preview, is that we have our point of sale piece that we do with every one of our sales EQ pieces. And that's this particular one is on bulls and bears. So that's another piece. If you would like that, we'll make sure we push that out along with the white paper. So I'll close that poll. Looks like 90% would like that. So we'll make sure everybody gets those. So let's move on to framing anchors, Jack, and
Okay.
how much. So what are we looking at here?
This reinforces the idea of the pictures. You can talk about a 1% CD and a 2.5 MYG and a 4% cap, but showing them on a chart with pictures reinforces the difference. It pounds home just how much more you might make with that annuity than you're going to make at the bank. And tied into this is a concept of opportunity cost, which shows how much not buying the annuity can cost someone. And the example in the next slide is somebody that has, say, $100,000 sitting in a CD, and they're lucky enough to find a CD with a 1% rate next year, and they're thinking of keeping it there because they know they're going to get the 1%, and they're not going to buy the fixed annuity with the 4% cap. One way to bring that back to them is to ask, so what you're saying is to safeguard getting $1,000, you want to give up making up to $4,000. Is that right? And a picture like this really drives home how much more opportunity there is with the fixed annuity and how much they can lose by not choosing the fixed annuity. That's a strong example of framing. There are times when framing should not be used because it's used incorrectly. Zero is your hero has been a line used since index annuities were created. It works okay when you're talking about participation rates because you're always getting something. You're getting something of an upside versus nothing, and it's a variable number. It does not work as well when you're talking about caps, because when you tell somebody a zero is your hero, and then you talk about a 4% cap, all the client is thinking about is two numbers. I can make 4 or I can make 0. So you just turn this, instead of an 80% chance of making 4%, which is how historically it would have gone, to a 50-50 choice, they're going to make nothing. So 0 is your hero is a great line. Don't ever use it when you're talking about caps.
Yeah, good point there. I mean, I think you're right about the heuristic is that a lot of people kind of in their mind frame it as, oh, it was probably a coin flip. It's 50-50 that'll happen. Now, in practice, I think the numbers certainly show that it's greater than a 50% chance that you're going to get some return if it's linked to an S&P 500 or other index.
Yeah. And a better way to do it even more so is to talk about relative returns. It's not 1 or 4% or 1 or 4 or 0%. It's the index annuity could make 3% more than the CD, or worst case, make 1% less. Now, instead of being an all or nothing thing, the upside is 3 times greater than the downside. And if you're talking to an investor, the fact that you don't have any loss at all beats a heck of a loss. A zero gain always beats a loss. Mental accounting is what this picture's about. And this really drives home when you're talking about surrender charges. Because when you're talking about an annuity, typically all the client is thinking about is the annuity. And when you mention a 10% initial surrender charge, all of a sudden they can see they're going to need that money out of the annuity because it's all they're looking at, and that surrender charge looms large. All this is a reminder that when you're talking about annuities, remember to talk about the whole package, the entire portfolio. Because as the next slide shows, when you look at all of the assets, that surrender charge, if it ever happens at all, is a very, very small part of the total. So remember mental accounting. We tend to put things into boxes. And if you want people to understand the impact of the decision, you need to open the boxes so they see how everything relates to everything else. Question behavior effect is interesting in a couple ways. One is simply asking a question can encourage a behavior. If you ask someone after dinner, are you going to take a walk on the beach? They may never have even been thinking about taking a walk, and now they're going to take one. Also, question behavior can cause an action if the action is in dissonance with the way we want to feel. That's kind of the next slide. It talks about cognitive dissonance. And it's simply a matter of asking a client, is it okay if you earn a little less money rather than risk losing the money? And is it okay to protect some assets from the risk of the stock market loss? If they're answering yes to those first two questions, and then the third question is, and my retirement assets are protected from the effects of a prolonged bear market, and that answer is no, they've created a state of cognitive dissonance. To resolve that, to buy a fixed annuity. Sorry.
Yeah, I think these probing questions that create a conversation with the client are really, really important. I know one that I learned early on was, for advisor to ask a client is my retirement portfolio guaranteed? And
Yeah,
the answers you typically get are no, or even better, I don't know, which creates an opportunity, obviously, to talk about, well, what does a guarantee mean, and what would be the value of a guarantee that you know had guaranteed income or you had a guaranteed rate of return.
very good. And there are other things that also affect the decision, known as affective effects is one of them. It talks about emotions. It says that you can't forget the emotions, which is what this whole thing is based on, the EQ, or emotional intelligence. Be aware of it. If things are going well, the sun's shining, your team won, you found $20, people are more inclined to make a favorable decision than if they just had their car dented. And the key point on this is to be aware of it and to be aware of how the client looks like they're feeling. Because if the client walks in and they seem upset, don't ignore it, ask what happened. The client might say something, I stepped in a puddle walking in, ruined these new shoes. By identifying what's bothering them, the client can move past it. They've identified the problem. They don't associate now the old emotion with anything new. They can put it behind them and now listen to you with a fresh face and a fresh mind. Be aware of affective effects. And a related thing is believability. We're close to the industry, so we tend to get very hung up on whether people like or don't like annuities. The studies show that only 1 out of 6 consumers do not like annuities, which means 5 out of 6 people either like them or have no opinion at all. And for the ones that have no opinion at all, showing a third-party article that supports fixed annuities can be very, very persuasive. So
And
there
we,
are
yeah,
heroes out there, but very few of them. Sorry.
yeah, as you say, Jack, we've certainly seen a lot of positive press even in the last few years when maybe this industry didn't get as much of positive press historically. You know, groups like the Alliance for Lifetime and Income with its national marketing advertising campaigns, even our own federal government with their government accounting office report suggesting people need annuities as part of the retirement plan, and some of the changes in QLAC, so forth. So there has been probably more positive press, I think, that we've seen uh, relative to prior years right now. That said, we do have some naysayers out there, and obviously advisors are going to run into clients that sometimes have a negative perception. I'm going to launch a poll question, and curious to get everybody's feedback. Is when you first mention annuity, the word annuity to your clients, what is their typical response? So Jack talked about, there's some that really don't have a negative perception, some that do. They pick up the Wall Street Journal and see a full page ad, which some people out there do that. And there's also some that actually do have a positive perception. Maybe they've owned annuities in the past. They've had success with it, provides those guarantees and support. So launching that question, I'm just kind of curious to get feedback right now, and curious to see what the responses are. So it looks to me like, and I'll close the poll here and publish those results. It looks like about 2/3 say their clients generally have a neutral perception, and only 1/3 have negative, and 4% have positive. So there are some people that have some pretty valuable annuities apparently. So I don't know, are you surprised by that, Jack, with 1/3 being negative and 2/3 neutral, or does that seem consistent?
It's a little heavier on the negative side that I'm aware of, but again, you may be dealing with clients that have already talked to someone who does not like annuities. So you're dealing with a little different class of people than the people in general. But all your points are great. Stepping forward a couple of months into another webinar we're going to be doing, the new disclosure rules on annuities and income and 401k plans is going to be very helpful for annuities, because plans are going to have to show the expected income from a person's 401k. And when people see the numbers that the safe rate is supposed to produce, they're going to be upset and they're going to be looking for alternatives. And that's all happening starting next year. So
Is
okay,
that where
that's
regulation, Jack, regulation
I'm
is
sorry?
actually creating sales?
It
Kind of
will
say
be,
that tongue in
yes.
cheek.
Yeah. Good news.
Well, let's move on to social effect.
Well, and that ties into that too, because a lot of people are not aware of annuities. It helps to, but we like to be part of a tribe, of a clan, and it helps to say, you may not be familiar with these, but last year, 1 million of your neighbors bought a fixed annuity. It's actually over 1 million. And you may not be familiar with fixed index annuities, but over the last 25 years, over $500 billion has been placed in fixed index annuities. And that's not the current value. That's just what they put into these things. So people have bought annuities, be part of that crowd. That's the social effect.
Let me
The
launch one
dilution.
more. Oh, go ahead, Jack. I was going to
No,
say,
I'm
I'm going
done.
to
I'm done. Go ahead.
launch one more question here, kind of related to the positioning of these products. And so we do a lot of work, obviously, here on the marketing front, customized marketing. So I'm going to launch a question if you would like a free market analysis report of your business to make sure the manner in which you're presenting yourself and the way that you can generate leads is aligned with what your goals are. So if you're interested in getting our free market analysis report from us, we'd be happy to do that. So I'm going to launch that poll question here, Jack, but keep talking about the social effect.
What ties into it ties into being part of the group. You want to be part of the winning group, and it's helpful to talk about annuities and that people just like them are buying annuities. And this is the time to bring up the stories of your clients that are also 67 years old and retired and looking for a safe place, or did not like the low interest they were paying from the bank, that type of thing. So talk about the social effect, make it real, make it personal. That's the social effect.
Let's move on to then cognitive biases and handling those. So binary, anchoring, and opportunity cost.
This kind of sums up the whole talk here. Try to make choices so that there's only 2 or 3 different choices. Annuity carriers are very good in creating products with many, many, many indexes and many, many, many choices. But if you get overwhelmed, if you get information overload, the inclination is to do nothing. It's helpful to tell the client, yes, you can have anything in the candy store, but typically what my clients do is they put half the money into index A, a quarter into index B, and a quarter into index C. Or in talking to a MIGA, instead of saying there's 80 different MIGAs out there, start off with saying, would you prefer a 5-year term or a 7-year term? So try to break all the decisions down into choices of 2 or 3 options, because it makes it easier to make the decision. Also remember anchoring. The first thing you say, especially the first number you say, is what the client is going to grab onto. So when you're talking about fixed index annuities conceptually, you don't want to start talking about the stock market and then talk about a 4% cap. You want to talk about bank instruments and 1% CDs and then talk about a 4% cap. So remember anchoring. The first thing you say is going to hit harder than anything else. And we've talked about opportunity cost. Make the choice of not buying the annuity the largest loss. Now wrap this up with my last one, which ties into everything that's been said today and how this started. Paint a picture, tell a story, be real. It's not about how much you know, it's about how much you care and how much the person sees you as caring. And Chris, that's your story.
Well, great, Jack. I'm going to launch one more question about our Bulls and Bears customer piece. So that's another one you would have had access to, but if you did not get, we certainly can get you a copy of our Bulls and Bears client-friendly piece that you can customize with your own agent name, logo, branding, and so forth. And so great piece that helps convey, especially in this uncertain times, the amount that the market would have to return or to get back to zero. So I think we talked about this in the first program, which is a lot of clients don't understand, a lot of advisors don't understand, a relative drop of say 25, 30% doesn't mean 25, 30% to get back to even. And so this is a nice client friendly piece. If you'd like that, go ahead and respond to the launched question there. So with that, Jack, I want to thank you so much for your valuable insights into client biases. And I also want to thank North American Company and TIA for their sponsorship. I'm certain that all of our attendees picked up some great nuggets here that you'll be able to take back into your practice and work with your clients more effectively and growing your sales, reaching your fullest potential. I'd encourage everybody here to reach out to your marketer here at Insurance Agency Marketing today at 800-255-5055 and ask about those 3 free items that we've been mentioning. Number 1, Dr. Marrion's white paper. Second, our proprietary point of sale piece on bulls and bears. And then third, our customized market analysis report to see if your advertising is aligned with your target demographic to ensure that the right marketing message is connected with them. Be on the lookout for next month's webinar program and the Elevate Your Sales EQ series with Dr. Marrion. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for your time and thanks for your partnership.